Margaret asked me on Thursday to give this presentation. So, and in front of this, so I thought it was going to be like 25 people or so, maybe 20 people or so, but it turned out it was a little more than that. So of course, then you start thinking, what are you going to say to all these people? And full disclosure, I'm moving next weekend, so we are packing up. I had a bike ride, as opposed to you. I'm not embarrassed of being in Lycra. Oh, well, it's not that pretty anyway, according to my kids at least. So I had a little bit time to think about it, and I thought, what should I talk about? And I thought that my favorite subject is myself. So that's what I figured I would talk about today, is my journey. So I spent about 15 years as a research scientist in the biologics area in the US, the other Merck. And of course, we called MSD here, for those who have not noticed that yet. So I spent 15 years as a research scientist, mostly in the preclinical development of biologics. Keytruda is one of the big ones that some of you might know, vaccines as well. And my experience there was, we always had challenges with IT. And it started kind of early on that we had some nice account managers. They would come to us. They had really nice PowerPoints. They were slick. They told us all the things we could do. We had ideas. They say, yeah, let's do them. They will go. They'll come back with 80 pages of requirements, and they'll say, this is what we can do. And then by then, probably we're off to something else. So my experience was there was a lot of good ideas, good intentions from IT, but they didn't deliver much, actually. At the end of the day, we were still having all the lab notebook systems. We did a lot of transcription of data. We felt we were really behind. We were probably not behind other pharmaceutical companies, but we felt we were behind, really. So as this went along, the business, which again was the scientists, got so tired of IT that people would actually decline meetings with our account manager. So what happened then is, of course, we didn't get much, and the vice president then came and said to me, we would like you to deal with IT. So I was like, wow, that's a great experience. When nobody else wants to, he thinks that I can do it. And so I got into that role, really being the liaison between IT and the business or the researchers. And it was quite interesting, because then I really got to look into what we had. My favorite quote was, we had a workshop, and it was a 4-day workshop, and the outcome of the workshop was, quote, we had a great discussion, right? And we recognized that, I think, a lot, that we would do a lot of these initiatives, we talk a lot about what could be done, but we can't really somehow get to that delivery. We don't really have that push to actually deliver, code, deliver working systems for us. You can, obviously, I only speak in my experience. I could imagine that other companies, I'm sure you're much better. So that was my experience actually coming in there. Was very good visionary, right? Very good view of kind of what could be, but not that delivery aspect of it. So Q a little bit further in this career was still in the science area, but liaison with IT. And Devendra actually joined a little bit before, a little after that. And what we had at the same time, so MSD had established a hub in the Czech Republic, Prague, where I'm living right now. It's not a Czech name, I'm Danish, but that's where I'm living. And what we saw, I think Devendra saw as well, I did not align this with Devendra at all, by the way, so hopefully it's okay, was a team that was really book of business. So it was people who were doing day-to-day services, data entry, because the scientists, actually my favorite is we had a PhD, a postdoc in veterinary immunology, doing data entry for us into a system, because the researchers, the scientists felt that it was too hard for them to use. So they will send Excel sheets to this immunology, PhD in immunology, and she would actually sit and type that in. Right? So, but what we had in Prague as well was a team that was very different. So in a sense, they were very different in their background. In Prague, there's not a very heavy pharmaceutical industry, right? There's a lot of automotive, there's insurance, finance, so on. So a lot of the folks that we had attracted there were people with talent who had a very different approach to kind of like the typical pharma person, right? And we saw the opportunity there to really build that team, to change that team from just being a support team to really be a development team or delivery team on the technical side. So I apologize because I got a little bit on the plane. So what we did was essentially started building up this team. And we went from about 25 people, and you don't know this actually, but we ended up being 110 today. And this is, again, I would say, of course, we have PhD level scientists still that understands the subject matter, subject matter expertise, but a lot of the folks had no expertise. But guess they could actually come in to our group and quite fast understand the challenges we are dealing with, because really what we are talking about today is, we're talking about challenges in the pharmaceutical space, but it's fairly generic, right? It's about data. It's about computers, right? I mean, it's basic. It's about moving things, not transcribing. It's about validating things, making sure that you can show that you're in control of your data and so on. So what we ended up with in Prague was a highly effective delivery organization of, again, about 100 people or so that was ready to really take on any challenge that was well defined. Now, the challenge, of course, is most of our business in the US, most of the research business in the US, I should say, so most of our development happens on the East Coast, some in San Francisco and some in Boston, but mostly in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania areas where most of our researchers are. So MSD we have about, I think, our research department is about 16,000 employees, right? And in the research space, most of those are in the US. So you had here people who wanted to deliver, but they didn't necessarily know what to deliver on. Cue that to the US. And by the way, I should say, because the vendor is here, I think the support that the vendor gave and how we worked on this team was really amazing to see that transformation from the book of business, as I call, support team, to these engaged folks that were ready to deliver. I think that was actually a really, really good experience. So in the US, we are still struggling with understanding the business challenges. What are the most important things that we should work on? What are the priorities? We don't have unlimited funds, right? We only have so much money. How do we spend our money the best way? How do we make sure that we validate some of our assumptions with the business as well? So that was one of the reasons why we started transforming into a product model. So maybe show of hands, how many of you are familiar or have the product model in your organizations? Okay, so it's a fair amount of folks that are familiar with that. So what we did, we established a product model. So we have, I'm not going to go into those details, but we have several product lines: scientific consumption, experiment, design, execution. We call it in the lab space. We call it, disease biology, understanding human, systems and body and so on. So we established that, and we kind of went away with the whole delivery model at that time, right? So we tried to move people back into these teams. So you had these very vertical teams that were what we call the product lines, which then came into products. And what we became very good at was to understand the business challenges, to understand what needs to be built, to go out and have great UX workshops. Right? If you ever have been in some of these design thinking workshops, if you're not familiar with it, you can look at LinkedIn, you can get a lot of nice videos, right? Great colors, right? All this stuff. So we became very good at that. We became very good at engaging with the users and listening to them. But what we missed in this journey was we forgot about the whole delivery aspect. We forgot about that we are IT, right? We are technical. And we actually need to have people, and we need to have, systems, organizations in place that can actually deliver on this. So it became challenging because if you look at, we actually saw a fair amount of growth in headcount as well with this, but you didn't really see so much growth in the delivery organizations or in the technical skill sets. So after realizing that, we then went in and we did what we call chapters. So what we did now, we moved to a horizontal function and took that out, not for the most part out, and we said, okay, for the large scale initiatives, typical that is, plus $10 million or so over several years, we want to ensure that we can deliver on that on time, right? Yeah, it's great with agile, right? You can use agile development methods and so on, but reality is if you build a new pharmaceutical research facility, right, you need to have a building, you need to have a roof, right? There are certain things you need to use waterfall. You cannot come back and ask, necessarily ask for more money eventually like that. So, so we built a delivery organization that is, we call it a chapter, that goes across all those product lines. And then we took out those very important projects. Not to say that we didn't leave important projects, but some of these more high value projects and put them out horizontally. What we also did was we took out some of those technical skill sets because we realized that technical folks like to be around other nerds as well, right? If you are one developer in a product team, yeah, it could be that you have some nice friends there and so on, but you want to be inspired too, right? You want to be with somebody who is your peers, right? I like to talk to scientists because I'm a scientist myself, so I get in, I need that, right? If I went to work in the finance area, I'd probably be kind of bored. So we took that out as well. And what we did, so we made 2 chapters there. And now we essentially have a product model, which is not the Spotify product model, because Spotify will tell you that, everything has to happen within each product. Each product has complete autonomy. You give them money to decide how to spend, but you can't really operate that way, right? You can't as a product, like how are you going to know that what the product you're working on is more important than some other product in another vertical, right? It's just impossible. You need significant oversight, and then you're kind of out of the product model. So what we did was we took that out. So now what we have is, I can't call them slim because they're not slim, but we have more slimmer products, and then we have a fatter, if you will, chapters that works on these delivery. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. Was that how do you effectively deliver in a product model, which has taken us probably about 3 years to realize, and we are still working on it. And if you're familiar with it, or if your company or your department is looking to go into a product model, I would encourage you to think about, I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, right? But really thinking about, is it, we use this company, Silicon Valley Group, if you're familiar with them, they're like the product model pioneers that you can hire, and then they will tell you how to run your product, right? But they do the Netscape, Spotify model, not necessarily to the pharmaceutical industry. So you need to really think about, how are you going to apply that to the business? It can be very expensive if you don't, right? Because again, the funding is limited, and those teams, they can easily lose touch with what we're working on. So this was, a last-minute presentation, and I didn't think I was going to take that long. So what I did actually yesterday, I thought about it, and I took my phone as I was walking, and I recorded it into notes on my iPhone. Right? So I just started speaking, and of course I got some stuff wrong. I went through, I edited it, and then I went into ChatGPT, because that's what you do. And I said, can you summarize my presentation? So there you go. So this is literally, I gave this to Tina. She's going to kill me because I put this in maybe 15 minutes ago. I did it, and I gave it to her, and this is what it shows. So let's see if I actually hit on all the points. I'll get to the last point in a second. Scientist to IT transition. I shared with you how I saw, from a science perspective, that IT was not really good at delivering anything, right? Good at the high vision, not good at delivering. I shared with you the challenge with the product model, how we easily move away from the technical delivery. Good at focusing on user needs. The priorities can still, with a product model, hopefully you help a little there. They will help us balance in the priorities, because really, everybody wants to work on the most important thing, right? If you're a developer, your delivery team, you don't want to work on something that's not interesting, right? Everybody gets behind the most important thing. You just have to know what it is. And then really the emphasis of this cross-product delivery approach, where it's not a pure product model, but where you really have teams that are very effective in working together. One thing I forgot, and this is not, Zifo didn't put this in, right? So I'll share that we can't actually do this alone. So if you look at a department like ours, so in the research space, we are 227 people, I know that actually, in our area, supporting just research, not the clinical side. So if you look at our department, we don't have enough people to do this, right? We can't hire developers. Yes, we can hire people who are interested in working for us, but we can't hire enough business analysts. We can't hire enough developers. Certainly we wouldn't do that for a 2-year project, right? It makes no sense. What are you going to do afterwards with those folks that you hire specifically for that? So that's where, we would use folks like Zifo to augment our team. And when I say augment, I'm not talking about the consulting arm, right? That's why I'm using the augment. We can easily get groups or consultants coming in and telling, again, doing the grand vision, right? That was just like our account manager we had in the beginning. You easily hire people who can say everything is possible. You can just throw some AI at this, and then you can do all that. But what we need are people, are teams that can deliver. So to that end, we like to have a strong foundation in our internal team. You have to have some strong architects, you have to have some strong developers, and you have to have some delivery leads within the team. And then you can augment that with external vendors. And we don't exclusively, it's not for Zifo, we use plenty of others that probably you use as well. And then you can get to that state where you can really, you go into our office in Prague and you will not know necessarily who's the contractor and who is the full-time. So apparently now sets the bar high, because it's going to say I'm going to have a motivating anecdote about Gary. So hopefully this is motivating. So how do you, what keeps me going? How do you motivate these teams, right? So we have, again, I spoke about, we have a lot of employees who are coming from outside the industry. They come from automotive, finance, consulting as well. How do you motivate teams? And I'll tell you why, my career at MST has been very long. And I actually often see that as a liability. I've been with the company for almost 22 years. And why did I stay? Why did I stay in pharma? And why are we all here? And I think, and I'm not criticizing or pointing anything, but nobody today has talked about patients, right? All the stuff we talked about today, there's been no word about patients, about saving people's lives, about improving quality of lives, anything like that. And I think that's important for us to remember, because otherwise we're just IT people, right? We're just IT people solving some problems. But if we can get to the point where we remember that the problems we are solving are problems for patients. And I'll tell you the story about Gary, and Gary is the one who keeps me going, right? So I met Gary, I think it was about 2014. So Gary was had a typical case. He was about 60, so he is older now, but he was 60 at that time. And he had a cough. It was like May, he went to the doctor, he had a cough, it wouldn't really go away. The doctor looked at it, said, hey, it's allergy season. Yeah, you also had this trip where you were cold in the airplane, just like I'm today. So, but hey, let's run some tests. So they ran some tests on Gary, and Gary had lung cancer. And Gary's one lung was essentially completely full of fluid. The doctor says, well, standard of care. We're going to go chemotherapy. We're going to get you radiation. And you're good for another 3 to 6 months. So imagine getting that message. And most of you probably know people who has had a similar experience. I have myself. not myself, but I have experiences with friends. So after he came up from falling off the chair, obviously, he went on to clinical trials.gov. Somebody had that up before, which I like. It's really a good site if you ever go on. If you haven't gone on it, you should go and check it out. It's actually very open. It's very interesting to see what's going on. And he got onto our Keytruda clinical trial. And I met him 3 years later, and he was cancer-free, right? So this is supposed to be the motivating part. That the work that me and 15,000 other people went into this industry to do, and why we're motivating ourselves, right, is to save people's lives like that, right? And that's for the most part everyone. I know we have folks from other groups as well, but for the most part here, I think everybody can be behind that, right? We are not here to have the coolest AI, the coolest user interface, move the coolest data. If actually, I would argue, if it takes an intern to transcribe data to get there, but we can get that faster, let's have that intern transcribe the data if we can move a clinical trial faster, right? That's what we do. So that's my closing would be, remember why we're here, and I would also encourage you to remind your teams why we're here, especially when we talk about prioritization, like we talked about strategy, what we talked about before. Ultimately, the strategy is for people like Gary, right? It's to enable us to save and improve lives. So that was my end. Thank you.
Couple of questions. Got time for a couple of questions?
So if there's no questions, I would ask you a question. If those of you who raised a hand who are familiar or are working in the product model, what are the challenges you have seen? And did any of the stuff I talked about resonate with you? There was like an area here, I think. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you can shout, Sally. Go on. Oh, here you go. Sorry. Okay.
Is it on now? Yeah, cool. One of the big challenges, I oversee a huge portfolio of products for in GSK, and we have it's massive and really diverse. And you made that comment around how do you prioritize between those verticals. So I was very interested in that because I spend my life trying to help that happen across our teams, exactly to that point about why is one thing of more value? Because again, in a scientific way, it's very, very valuable to that group of scientists, but not so much to another group as well. So it's more a reflection and recognition of that problem. I was interested to hear how you were solving that with chapters versus, so it's not a model we use currently, but I could fully understand that element of prioritizing when people are very embedded in their product. Again, it's one of those babies that that they've been working on that, and I find it very hard for people in a true agile methodology where that flexibility to actually prioritize and move people to the problems, that's the ideal state, but we don't get there because everybody's too embedded with their product. So I very much resonated. So I'm interested in perhaps catching up with you about how your chapter model, because it's not something we do currently. Yep. So thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Another one. So for us, the biggest difficulty was embedding the feedback loop. How to convince the users, the internal users, the real experts in the company to work with us, to try the product that we are developing, to give honest feedback, not kind feedback, but honest feedback, and then to integrate this back into the productization loop. Yep. That was the biggest challenge.
Interesting you mentioned that, actually. And Margaret might know, but recently we're doing a project with the US team of Zifo, and one of the things that we've been very sensitive to is to take too much of the business time. So what happens, which I also saw on the business side, and I didn't give that anecdote, but really, I remember once I had a problem I needed solved, and I forwarded to our account manager, forwarded to a technical SME, and within a couple of days there was 20 people on the call, right? And they all wanted my time. So I didn't know out of those 20 people, who should I actually talk to? Like what call? I couldn't take all the calls because then I would be nothing but talking to IT. So so I think so I'm very, for the teams that I lead and the projects I'm involved in, I'm very sensitive to the business time. So then when we reach out, it's very like what is it we need from them, and they know ahead of time, and their manager support as well, so they know that at the end of the year they will be rated how well they worked with IT. Preferably, I don't know if you all have this here, but we have the bonuses and all that stuff that's related to your performance. And then be very respectful of their time as well. So we try and get all the teams together actually, and then we knock it out in one workshop or one go. So we don't like cherry pick, right? But we really come in and do it in one. But it's a big problem is getting the feedback and getting the engagement of the business, because they're not IT people. They're off doing something else, which is what we are paying them for anyway, right? We are paying for them developing drugs, not developing IT systems.
One more.
Yep. From my experience, I mean, we try to establish kind of an integrated solution. So basically, it's a SaaS application, and we build a lot of things around it. We also separate it on the individual, like satellite process or whatever. We do pods around that, and I think what we are doing, we are good. But then you're losing the overall the picture, the big picture, because if everybody is organized in pods, and that's what Sanofi at the moment is heading to, is you lose sight what the others are doing, right? So you need to be very good in communication and sharing the strategy, not only like nice PowerPoints. It needs to also go to the business, right? So this is the strategy, this is what we are doing, because business, good news on their side, they have also great ideas, and we need to do agile, we need to do pods and all that. So that's the challenge I can share. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Lovely. Thank you very much. We got to go on to the next one. Sorry. Thanks, Jens. Really good. Thank you.